Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to build the desktop version of our nav menu with the new nav nestable element. We need these 5 links in the menu, and you can see here that services is going to have a drop-down menu with a few sub-links. Let's make the 4 basic top-level links first. You can see here the default link that Bricks gave us already says home. So I'll select that nav link, it's this one here. Come over to its settings. It's currently just by default linked to an external URL. Let's change that to an internal post or page. Select that, and I'll choose the home page. If you're linking to pages or posts within the site, always make sure to choose internal post or page here. That way, if you later decide that you want to update the URLs of any of these pages, they'll all be kept up to date. We can ignore all these attributes for our purposes here. If we wanted an icon for this link, you could add one here. Actually, let's do that. So I'll click into icon, select a library. I like the Ion Icons library. I'll search home, and let's have this icon here. Yep, I like that. Okay, so the next link by default says about. Okay, that's handy because I want an about link here. Now we don't actually have an about page at the moment, so for now I'm going to leave that at external URL and the hash symbol, which is just the usual way of setting a dummy link. Next we need a blog link, so I will right click this existing nav link in this case, click duplicate. This is the one. Over to its settings. I'll change that to blog. And again, leave this dummy link in place for now. We're going to be creating a blog listing page later in the course. We need a contact link as well. This time, let's add the text link element from the elements panel instead. That drops it into the structure. Might as well just rename that to nav link, just in keeping with the rest of them. Come over to the settings, rename this contact, and the link to can again, just for now, be external URL and the hash symbol. And then services is a drop-down. Well, we already handily have an existing drop-down element as a starter. I'm going to drag that into the right place. Come over to the settings, rename this to services. And again, for now, let's just link to a dummy external URL. And then inside the drop-down element, so let's open it up. We have 2 existing nav link elements as a starter. I'll select the first one, and let's make these the sublinks inside the services drop-down. So this first one is plan, and the next one is design. Rename that. And I'll right click that one in the structure to duplicate it for the next link. And this one can be build. And you can see here, although it doesn't look right at the moment, the drop down is actually open because if you click the drop down element in the structure, it opens the drop down for you. Let's close that down. Now for some reason, it still says drop down in the navigation. Should say services. Tell you what, let's save the page. Give it a refresh. There we go. Sometimes Bricks just needs a little bit of encouragement. All right, that's the basic nav in place. Now, some styling. Now, we always start from the top level with styling because the styles trickle down to all the other elements. So the top level, in our case, is nav nestable. So I'll select that. Let's come over to its settings. So here we can style all the top level items inside the nav at once. We can style all the drop downs at once, and we can style the mobile menu. So into top level item, we can set the gap between each of the items. It's 30 pixels by default. I'm going to go with 1.5 rem. You can justify the links left, center, or right. I'm happy with them as they are. And the padding is really useful if you wanted, like a certain style where each link is more like a box. When you hover over it with a background color, the padding works really well there. But of course, ours is just a simple list here, so I'm going to ignore the padding. We don't need any background color either. But into typography. I'm happy with the default color, white is fine, but I would like to make the links uppercase and a font weight of, let's try 600. Yeah, that's good. And while we are setting styles for these top level items, let's set the hover styles as well. I'd like these links to be yellow when I hover over them. Now, you already know how to set hover styles. We have to come up to the states panel, top left, put the site into hover mode, and now everything that we set below will be for the hover state. So back into typography again. Let's make the hover text color yellow, this one in our palette. Of course, they all turn yellow because we're in hover mode. So Bricks is actually showing us what these links are going to look like when we hover over them. Now that's actually all I need for hover. So come back up to clear the hover state. Let's give that a test. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Okay, still styling the top level items. Let's now come down to the active panel. Here we have controls for the active links, meaning what do we want these links to look like when it's the current page that we're on? Like if we're currently on the home page, what do we want this link to look like? I'd like active links to be yellow, the same as hover. And if you're wondering, yeah, the active link settings are here. They're actually not under the states pseudo class menu like hover was, even though that is one of the options. This is a bit confusing, at least it was to me. But anyway, just as long as you know, for the navigation, you set your active link settings here, not up in the pseudo class states panel. So I want active links to be yellow, so in typography, I'm going to change that color to yellow in our palette. And nothing's changed. Well, that is because we are currently just editing a header template. We're not actually actively viewing any of these pages at the moment. What to do? Well, let me just quickly save this template first. Okay, so what we could do is we could skip over to the home page, into the pages menu, select home, and see now we're on the home page and the home link is highlighted as the active link, which is great. But what if I wanted to edit the active link styles further? All right, well, I'd then have to edit the header template again, which you can do from here. But now, well, we're not on the home page anymore, so I can't see the active styles anymore. Dope. Well, what we can do instead is tell Bricks to basically pretend we're viewing the home page while we're editing the header template. It's really easy. So we're in the header template here. I'm going to come up to template settings. Remember, this is where we set conditions to show the header on the entire site. Well, this time we need populate content. So this is where you can set an existing page, which will be used as the preview content for this template. So under content type, we want to choose a particular single page, that's down at the bottom. And from the drop down, that is going to be our home page. Apply preview. And after the header template refreshes, there you go. Yeah, so we're still editing the header template, as you can see, if I hover over it like this. But the rest of the page underneath it is being populated with content from the home page, although you can't actually edit that here. And because the home page is now being used as the preview content for the header template, the home link is now showing the active style. Okay, back to the structure. Now, if I select the nav nestable element again to edit it, back into our top level settings, down to active styles. So here is where I could now continue to tweak these styles in the template and actually be able to see the effect of it on our current active home link. That's because we're using the home page as the preview. Make sense? All right, back to the settings again. So now we come to the styles for all drop-downs inside this navigation. Again, when I choose this panel, see how the drop-down itself opens up on the screen? That's so that you can actually see what you're styling. It clearly needs some styling. Let's have a look. So we have some styling for the icon. That just means the little down disclosure arrow here. Then some styles for the drop-down content. That's the content inside the drop-down. And also we have some styles for each item in the drop-down as well, meaning our drop-down sublinks. But remember, while you can set styles for all drop-downs inside the navigation menu here, you can also select each individual drop-down element in the structure, and in that drop-down's individual settings, you can set all kinds of styles to override anything that you actually set at the top level. So let's come into the drop-down icon settings. We're still editing the nav nestable element here. So first, you can set some padding around the icon if you wanted to. I can't really think of a use case for this, but it's there if you need it. Gap sets the gap between the icon and the text. That's this gap up here. And the default 10 pixels looks fine to me. And here you can change the position of the icon, so you can have it over to the left or over to the right. And also the size of it as well. Again, all fine for me. Although I might change that to 1 rem. You can change the icon color as well. Transform in CSS means to change the shape or the position or the size or the orientation of something. And so here you can change the position of the icon when the dropdown is closed, and also the position of the icon when the dropdown is open. Now, if you wanted to change the actual icon itself to something different than this little arrow, or you want to get even more fine-grained with icon styles, then you would do that in the individual drop-down element in the structure. Then to style the drop-down content, okay, so this is the content inside the drop-down box itself. Most of these are self-explanatory, so I'm just going to focus on the ones that I actually want to change. You can change the minimum width of the box. I think by default in Bricks it's set to 200 pixels wide or so, and that is fine by me. Background color. Okay, let's change this to our secondary yellow. Oh, the drop down's closed. So if you scroll back up to the top here, click the drop down again. There we go, it's back open. I want to change the color to be our text color, so into typography. choose color, and this is our text color here. Okay, I'd also like this to be uppercase, and font weight for drop-down links can be 500. Okay, let's come out of typography. Again, we have some transform controls. These are to change the starting position and the open position of the actual box itself, the yellow box. Here's how it works. Transform is the position that the box will start in before you click the drop-down. So this is the position that the animation will start from. Transform open is a position that the box will end up at after you've opened the drop-down. And then the transition is basically the animation between these two. And so here you set how long it's going to take for the drop-down to move from its starting position and where it'll end up when it's open. It'll be easier to understand if I just show you. So let's set a starting transform. Now you can set all kinds of wacky transforms here, but all we really care about is where the box is on the y-axis, meaning up and down, because we want the drop-down box to animate up and down, I reckon. Now I'm going to set this starting Y position to 0. I think it's 0 by default anyway, but no harm in making it explicit. So that means that the box will start opening from the actual link, as you can see. And then transform open. Let's try the box opening, say 10 pixels down from the 0 start position. Okay, and then the transition, again, that's the animation between the starting position and the end position. I'm gonna just leave it as it is for now. We may need to tweak it. Let's see what we have. To open and close the drop-down while you're still editing the nav nestable element, the best way is just to open and close the drop-down settings panel up here. See? Close, open. Now, while I'm opening and closing this drop-down settings panel, just have a look up in the top right at the drop-down box. Closed, open. You see what's happening? Okay, it starts at 0 at the actual services link and then animates down 10 pixels from there. How about we set the actual start position a little bit further down? So back to the transform controls, here they are. Let's set the starting position to maybe 4. It'll start just a little bit further down. And when it's open, maybe something like, say, 17. Cool, I like that. Also, this animation was a bit quick, I think, 0.2 seconds. And I'm actually going to replace the entire default setting with, say, 0.5 seconds. This is basically shorthand for animate the whole thing between these two transforms for 0.5 seconds and make it an ease in animation, which is almost always what you want anyway, because it looks nice. All right, let's move on to the item. So to style each item in the dropdown, that's each individual link. We have the ability to add padding around each item. We can also change the background color and the border and the typography. And we've already set the typography in the content panel up here. So all I'm really concerned about here is this spacing. If we wanted to keep these links pretty simple as they are now, then I actually quite like the space between each of these links. Maybe I could add something like 0.5 rem bottom padding. Maybe half that, 0.25 rem. So that adds 0.25 rem space underneath each item. And if I wanted some padding at the sides as well, because it looks a little bit crushed up, how about something like 0.75 rem each side? That's not looking too bad. Now we just need some padding up at the top. Let me try adding a top padding of 0.25 rem again, same as the bottom. So that's now added this top padding to each item as well. So there is now a bigger space in between each of them. Effectively, there's 0.5 rem padding between each of these, but only 0.25 and 0.25 at the top and the bottom. And I would actually quite like the same space top and bottom as there is at the sides and in between each of the links. So the padding at the sides is 0.75 rem each. Let's make the top and bottom 0.75 as well. Okay, well, we definitely don't want that because now the gap between each item is huge. So I'm going to put this back. I'm going to leave the side padding as it is, remove the top padding completely, and revert this back to 0.25 rem padding bottom. Now at least the padding at the sides and between each of the items is the same. Now to add the extra padding required up at the top, well, if you think about it, what we're doing here is setting the padding on each individual item. What we want is also to add some padding for the entire box as well, inside the entire box. Well, let's come over to the structure. Here's the drop-down element. And see this block inside labeled content? Well, this block is wrapping all the links inside, and it's this block that's actually forming the yellow box. So the top level drop-down element is the top level link, and then the content block inside it is the box that drops down. So all we need to do is add our padding to this element. So we'll come over to its settings, come into Style and Layout, and into Padding. Where is it? There we go. So I'll add something like 0.5 rem at the top. That looks better already. Let's do the same at the bottom as well. And, I quite like that. Nice and simple. However, what if we wanted a different style? Where maybe we hover over each link and the background of the link changes? Let's try it. Okay, so let's come back to Nav Nestable. Let's come over to its settings and down to the drop-down settings. Again, this is the settings for all drop-downs inside Nav Nestable. Now we want to edit each item inside the drop-down, so it's these settings here, but we want to edit the hover style. And where we do that? That's up in the States panel, top left, and choose Hover. Again, now everything we set below is going to be for the hover state. So for each item, we'll come into background, change the hover background to our dark BG in the palette. Let's also change the text color to white. Not bad so far, we're getting there. Let's clear the hover state now. Click the X to clear. Let's give these a test. Now that's not bad, but these need to be taller. We need more padding inside each of the items. And also it needs to be the same padding top and bottom so that the background color height is equal top and bottom. You see here at the moment, the space at the top and bottom isn't equal, and it needs to be. So let's adjust the padding. And by the way, we need to adjust the padding of these when we're not in the hover state, because if we only change the padding while we're in the hover state, then every time we hover over these links, the size of them would jump up and down. So we need to have the same padding for the normal state as we do for hover. You'll see what I mean. So let's try 0.25 rem, top and bottom. Give that a test. Let's have a little bit more actually. Let's go 0.5 rem. Try that again. Yeah, I like that better. Now, because the space between these links is now effectively 1 rem, meaning 0.5 at the top, 0.5 at the bottom, I'm going to change left and right to also be 1 rem. It just looks more consistent. Oops, I set this to 1M by mistake. Silly me. Anyway, moving on. And I like that a lot. Let's give that another test. Yep. Command P to preview. All right, that's looking good. Back to the editor. Now, I would like to just add some little extras to the drop-down menu before we go. We have exhausted all the drop-down options in the Nav Nestable element, but as I say, we can make further tweaks to each individual drop-down by editing the drop-down element itself. Let's do that. So I'll select the drop-down element here, come over to its settings, let's scroll down, into icon. So here, if we wanted to, you could set a specific icon for this drop-down, and you could overwrite all the settings that we set for drop-down icons at the top level if you wanted this drop-down to be different. I'm really happy with all of these though. Let's keep going. It's carrot I'm interested in. No, not one of those. Let's set one up. So I'm going to set its size to be 0.5 rem. Look up now, you can see what's happened. The carrot is this little arrow. Let's set its color. Same color as the drop-down box. And its position. I'm just going to shove it over from the left a little bit. Let's go 1 rem. If you can see, I'll just come into preview again. We have this little arrow pointing up, which I think looks really nice. And although we're not covering this in this lesson, also in the settings for each individual drop-down element, you can enable this drop-down to be a mega menu instead, or a multi-level drop-down. Anyway, to wrap up, let's just come back up to the top level Nav Nestable element one more time. So we've set our styles for our top level items, we've set our styles for our drop-down. So next are the settings for the mobile version of this menu, but we're going to cover that separately in the next lesson. So your task then is to create your own desktop nav menu. So first add the Nav Nestable element to the structure, change all the names of the links and drop down links to what you want, like home, about, blog, etc. And then just work your way down the settings. And once you've done that, next we're going to move on to styling our mobile menu. I'll see you there very shortly.